If you're a history buff, you need to hear about Nixon's wild economic experiment in the 70s. It was a time of great upheaval and uncertainty, and the decisions made during this period had far-reaching consequences that are still studied and debated today. Nixon's approach was nothing short of revolutionary, and it left an indelible mark on the American economy and society. Price controls, frozen wages, and a ripple effect that echoed through the decade. These measures were part of a broader strategy to combat the rampant inflation that was threatening to spiral out of control. The idea was to stabilize the economy by putting a temporary halt on price increases and wage hikes, but the reality turned out to be much more complex. Let's set the stage. It's 1971, inflation is skyrocketing and the economy's on a roller coaster. The cost of living is rising rapidly, and people are feeling the pinch. The government is under immense pressure to take action, and Nixon decides to implement a bold and unprecedented plan. This plan, known as the Nixon Shock, aimed to curb inflation and stabilize the economy, but it also introduced a level of uncertainty and disruption that few could have predicted. Nixon decided to hit the brakes with a bold move. He froze prices and wages for 90 days. This was a drastic measure, and it was met with a mix of hope and skepticism. On one hand, people were relieved that something was being done to address the economic turmoil. On the other hand, there were concerns about the long-term implications of such a sweeping intervention. This was part of the Nixon Shock. Initially, people were thrilled. The immediate effect was a sense of relief and optimism. For a brief moment, it seemed like the government had found a way to tame the beast of inflation. People celebrated the fact that their wages and prices were no longer spiraling out of control, and there was a sense of newfound stability. Prices of groceries, gas, and rent couldn't go up. This was a welcome change for many households that had been struggling to make ends meet. The freeze on prices meant that families could plan their budgets with a bit more certainty, and there was a temporary respite from the relentless pressure of rising costs. But as the months rolled on, the cracks started to show. The initial euphoria began to fade, and the unintended consequences of the price controls started to become apparent. Businesses found themselves in a bind, unable to adjust their prices to reflect the true cost of goods and services. This led to a range of problems, from reduced profitability to outright shortages of essential items. Businesses couldn't adjust prices to reflect the cost of raw materials, leading to shortages. This was particularly problematic for industries that relied on imported goods, as the cost of these materials continued to rise even as domestic prices were frozen. The result was a growing mismatch between supply and demand, and consumers began to experience the frustration of empty store shelves and long waits for basic necessities. Imagine going to the store and finding empty shelves. That's what happened. The shortages affected a wide range of products, from everyday groceries to more specialized items. People had to adapt to a new reality where they couldn't always find what they needed, and this added a layer of stress and uncertainty to their daily lives. A lesser-known fact: the policy backfired on farmers big time. Agriculture was hit particularly hard, as farmers were unable to raise prices to cover the increasing costs of feed, fuel, and other inputs. This created a financial squeeze that many farmers simply couldn't withstand. Unable to raise prices, many couldn't cover their costs, leading to protests and even the slaughter of livestock to cut losses. The situation became so dire that some farmers had no choice but to cull their herds, as they couldn't afford to keep feeding animals that they couldn't sell at a profit. This was a heartbreaking and desperate measure, and it highlighted the severe impact of the price controls on the agricultural sector. The ripple effects were felt long after the controls were lifted. The economy took years to fully recover from the disruptions caused by the Nixon shock, and the experience left a lasting legacy. It served as a cautionary tale about the dangers of heavy-handed government intervention in the economy, and it influenced economic policy debates for decades to come. Nixon's price fixing showed us that quick fixes in the economy can have wild consequences. The lessons learned from this period are still relevant today, as policymakers grapple with the challenges of managing inflation, promoting growth, and ensuring economic stability. The Nixon shock remains a powerful reminder of the complexities and unintended consequences of economic intervention. It's a fascinating chapter in history that reminds us, sometimes slowing down time in the economy isn't as simple as hitting pause. The Nixon shock era is a vivid example of how well-intentioned policies can lead to unexpected and far-reaching outcomes, and it underscores the importance of careful planning and consideration in economic decision-making.